give the stage to Michael. Michael, please, and applause Michael and welcome him.
Thank you. And I'm going to try my only words I understand in Polish, I think. Dzień dobry, right? No, I know something else, but those are swear words, and I'm not going to try those. My name is Michael. Over the last few years, I gave quite some presentations, and I just changed jobs, so I must remember not to call my old company and call the new company. But I come from Belgium. Arrived here yesterday, saw some interesting talks, had a great party yesterday, so that's always lovely, so thanks for the warm welcome. And I would like to talk to you today about a topic which is very near to my heart, which is the data bias. Because nowadays, if you are talking about the IT industry, a lot of our decisions, the projects that we undertake, the strategies that we develop, are based on statistics and data. So data is very important. But if you dive deeper into the data, you realize that a lot of the data is biased. And you might say, Michael, what do you mean with bias? Well, let's start with the definition of a bias. What is a bias? And I know that yesterday, Olivier Deneau was talking about the biases in AI. Contrary to what you might expect, this is not a talk on AI. So if you don't like, if you want to hear something about AI, run away. This is not about AI. This is something about how people look at the world and the data. So back to the bias. A bias is something that you are unaware of that changes the way you make decisions. It's a prejudice, it's a preference which is unknown to you. And that is dangerous. Because you can say, you know what, I have a favorite soccer team or I have a favorite singer, and then you will always put them in favor of something else. But the bias is something that you are unaware of, and you make your decisions while you think that you use them for data, but in fact you're making them on prejudice. So when I started to make this presentation, I was thinking about how are we using data. And when doing the research, it appeared that there's one type of bias which is very common nowadays that I and a lot of people around me were unaware of. That is that what is called a data bias is actually a gender bias. I see a lot of men in the audience. Be afraid. Because I was afraid as well. I was looking for examples, and I found my first example, and my second example, and my third example. And I started from being afraid, to being annoyed, to being angry. And that's not a good sign. That means we need to change something. Please join me in this list of examples of how we, as an organization, as an audience, as a society, as a world, have a bias against certain genders. Let's start with an empirical study. There was a study done amongst academic psychologists that would investigate gender biases based on job candidates. And what they did, they created 4 identical CVs. Well, instead 2 and 2. They created one CV for a senior manager position, where the CV was completely, entirely, exactly the same. Same experience, same school, same references, same whatever. The only thing that changed was the name and the gender. They had 2 other CVs of a lower position, a stager, an intern, exactly the same except for the name and the gender. And they gave those resumes, these CVs, to an audience of both male and female recruiters and team leads and whatever. Well, you know what's coming, right? There was a 71% more chance that the man was hired. Identical resume, identical references, identical everything. Both by men and women. So if you think this is about a man recruiting a man, no, it's not true. It is about people favoring men when it comes down to jobs. And if you take it as statistics, because these were blind readings, the male CVs were graded higher than the female CVs, even though they were identical. So the audience could very well distinguish between the junior profile and the senior profile. That was obvious. but they made a gender-biased decision just based on gender, which is dangerous. Let's take a second study. There's the cliché that women are believed to be worse at mathematics and science and technology and engineering than men. Well, what happened is there were tests being undertaken. University of Cambridge, where they said, okay, we're going to give some tests, verbal aptitude test, and mathematics test to both men and women. And what the result was? Women were better in mathematics than men. So they showed these results to the ones taking the decision, and the end result is that the employer still chose the male candidate. 59% of the employer chose the male candidate, even though there was the official result of the test. Hey, you know what? Based on the test, you have to recruit this woman, and the employer says, nah, I trust my gut feeling, I trust my gender bias. That result is incorrect. Seems a bit like the American elections, right? We have the factual data and we have our biases. For the women in the audience, how's the temperature here? Cold? Yeah, exact, Seba. For you it's warm, right? Yeah. If you talk to architects, they base their way of balancing temperature in office rooms on a study based in 1973 that says that for the average employee, the room temperature should be between 21 and 21.5 degrees Celsius. Now that's great if you're the average 40-ish aged man of 70, 75 kilograms or more. But that doesn't work if you're a female. That doesn't work if you're a woman. You, most of the time, weigh less, and you have a higher metabolism. For a woman, the ideal temperature is 24 degrees. That's why you have, in a lot of offices places, a lot of arguments. It's too hot, no, it's too cold, and we change the temperature the entire time. But that's also a bias. Yeah, everybody's the same. No, not everybody's the same. I walked around this lovely building yesterday evening, and I did something I should not have done. I visited the ladies' restrooms, just out of curiosity and out of study. Seriously. This is not an IT area. This is just a building that hosts parties and events and conferences, so it's neither inclining towards male or female. So if you take a look at restrooms, they are identical in size, so there's no gender bias, right? But still the queue in the ladies' toilet is larger than the men's toilet. That makes sense. Just based on pure physics, women have a smaller bladder than men, so they have to go to the toilet more often. Women have also different issues at toilets than men. They menstruate, they take the kids with them, typically men don't do. So they spend more time in toilets, and still there are less toilets for women than for men. Even how toilets are composed is a gender bias. If you go to your average male toilet, you have a lot of toilets, but you also have the urinals. So if you just have to pee as a man, that goes quickly. But for females, you don't have that luxury. So by gender bias, how buildings are designed, women are already put backwards towards men. If I would ask you, what are the signs that right now you would get a heart attack? Since you're a typically male audience, you would say, you know what, Michael, it feels like an elephant is on my chest, I have a shortage of breath, blah, blah, blah. That's what we see in every movie, in every book, in every rom-com. That's a heart attack, right? If somebody would approach you that says, you know what, I'm feeling a little bit nauseous, I have a stomach ache, and I have a headache. Those are the signs of a female heart attack. Women that suffer a heart attack, they don't have a shortage of breath. They don't have some heavy weight on their chest. You know why we don't know that? Because the majority of medical tests is undertaken on men. Because women, if they are selected for empirical trials, medical trials, their results are taken out because of hormones and periods and whatever. So we often misdiagnose women when they are suffering from a heart attack. People die because of that gender bias. In the UK, they have developed a new healthcare program for heart attack prediction. Great, we try to save people of suffering from heart attacks. Lovely, I can only encourage that. The disadvantage is, if you take a look at statistics, less than 10% of the data used is coming from female heart attacks. So we're very great in predicting heart attacks for men, but not so much for women. Very fine, Michael, but this is nothing with our business. I know we're an IT conference, we're testing. Okay, great, let's do some testing. Car crashes. I do not want to be a woman driving a car. If you are a woman, you have a 17% higher chance to die in a car crash and a 47% higher chance to have severe injuries. Is it because we are discriminating? No, it's because we are different. It may come as a surprise for you, but the majority of women have breasts. So the moment we put on our seat belts as women, we put them either over or under our breast, not where they should be. So our seat belt is not protecting, is not built for women. If you're a woman and you sit in the car, for the men in the audience who have a partner which is female, typically they put the seat a little bit more in front and higher because they are shorter, so they have a lower size for legs. That means that if you have a car crash, the car is not designed for that position. So the engine comes towards the women more quickly than to the men. And what's even worse, if you ever visit a car crash, you know what the actual dummy looks like that they use, that one? 1.78 meters. That's higher than the average woman. So we have no statistics about how car crashes influence women because we have only one type of test object. Would we accept that in testing of IT systems? No. It's again a gender bias. Coming back to testing, that lovely potion, Viagra. We all know what it's used for. Do you also know that studies show that this is the best solution for female menstrual aches? We know that. Pfizer knew that. GenAI knows that. But we don't use it for that because, well, these statistics are again based on female studies and, well, these are influenced by hormones, it's very hard, and this is not our prime audience. Men with erectile problems, great, that's an audience because we take pride in our erections. But for the women, well, too bad for them. Just suffer, take some paracetamol or whatever, and just go through it. Gender bias. And even in more profound institutions, you have the gender bias. At a certain point in time, 4 years ago, NASA had a great idea. Everything in space was typically done by men and for men. And I said, you know what, we're going to do something to empower women in our organization. We're going to do a spacewalk with 2 females at the same time. Sounds like a great plan. So they flew 2 women to the ISS. They said, we're going to do the spacewalk, and all of a sudden, hey, we can't. Because in the ISS, you have 3 different suits. You have a medium, a large, and an extra large. These are all designed for men. So only when they arrived in the space station, ready to take on their suit, they said, it's too large. And you might say, here on Earth, well, it's too large, it's okay. A space suit which is too large is dangerous. So they had to abandon a televised spacewalk with women because the suits were suffering from a gender bias. Again, Britain, testing. Gender-neutral armored vest. Great. So instead of having different types of armored vest, in the UK they said we're going to go for one model. Great. Remember what I told you with those crash test dummies? Women have breasts. So a woman, a female police officer who wears an armored vest, that vest goes more up. Since the introduction of armored vest in the UK, the unisex model, 24% of women get injured in the stomachs because it's not protected anymore. So gender equality even has dangers if you're on the opposite side of the target audience. I promise you not to talk about AI and Gen AI, but I'm going to do it for a little bit. You know what this image is? No? This is woman cooking. Sorry? No, you can make fun of it, but apparently AI is fed by data. Of course it is. And typically, if you see food in the kitchen, AI recognizes food as somebody is cooking. And if somebody is cooking based on data of statistics and images, it's a woman cooking. That's dangerous because that data reinforces our beliefs who should be cooking. If you're using Alexa or Siri or whatever kind of voice recognition program, again IT, it is 70% more likely to recognize the male voice. Why? Well, because it has been trained by male voices. Typically, men love toys. As you love people, yeah, that's right, we love toys. Well, of course you love toys. That means you start using them, and if you're using them, if you're one of the early adopters, you're also the ones whose data is being captured. And you reinforce that language model that these tools are using. Because these things are trained by male voices, they listen better to male voices. That's dangerous. My wife has no idea how to operate these things at home because it doesn't listen to her. And even in popular media, you have the same thing, and I hope this works. Your audio? No. No audio. Oh, that's bad. Okay. Never mind. For those who want, the presentation will be shared, then you can take a look at it. But this is a typical example. Woman tries to steer some neutral adaptation of some voice recognition module, doesn't work, the male says something, and it works. And that happens in numerous households worldwide. Smartphones. I recently had to buy a new smartphone, and these things are big. New smartphones are designed for men. The average smartphone is 15.5 centimeters tall. The average female hand can only hold a smartphone of 13 centimeters. So if you're a woman and you want a new smartphone, then you have to go to either an inferior model to have some kind of comfort or to an old model. That's not what it should be. That's not nice. Self-driving cars. 2019, Uber has a self-driving car that runs over somebody and they do a causal analysis. We want to know, as testers, why didn't the car recognize that person crossing the street? You know why it was? NTSB confirmed. Because the person crossing the street was less than 1.72 meters tall. It was a woman. If that person, whether it was male or female, doesn't matter, but the software was trained with the average engineer, which is 1.8 meters. Because that person was not tall enough, it was not recognized. There are good things as well. Assassin's Creed Syndicate was the first game where you, if you're a gamer, that could choose a female main character. Until then, a lot of the games that were on the market were mainly male-oriented. Male characters, whatever. So it's great. You can switch characters between male and female main character. Great. One downside. You can play with a female character as much as you want until a certain point. Every boss level or every end level, you have to play with the male character. The female character cannot win. What are we reinforcing to our kids? Gender biases. If you come to IT, the Unicode Consortium is the organization that streamlines all your emojis and emoticons and whatever. So you use one code, and in every system they understand the same thing. Even there you find gender biases. If you type in this Unicode character, which translates roughly to a runner, this is what you get. Apparently females don't run. Oh, let's go for a spy. You know, James Bond, all-female spies? Well, according to Unicode, spies are quite male. Let's go for a dancer, right? Well, men don't dance. Those are gender biases. Now, if there's one thing I like, then it's usability testing. And one of our former companies, one of our former customers was H&M, the clothing company. And they did all kinds of testing to find out what the best type of website was, and A/B testing or whatever. So I got hold of some data, and this was, for me, mind-boggling. This was a preview of the website that they were creating. And for the first time, they made a distinction between male and female audience. Where do you think the men were looking at? And I see people, I know where they're looking at. Yeah, you're right. This is where the men are looking at. They look at the face, at the body. They look a little bit to the right, to the menu, to the price, and some overview. The man has seen nothing about the breadcrumbs at the top. So H&M knows now, whatever we put here, men don't read it. Now, what do you think that the women are looking at? Exactly the same thing. So you might think that male are chauvinist and whatever. No, women also look at the body, also look at the menu over here, put a lot of attention to the price. Didn't know that. And they see a little bit of the breadcrumbs over here. So typically you can say that for this website, for this particular image, women spend more time, have the same visual attention pattern as men, with some more definitions or more depth at certain areas. So you know, if you're H&M and you can diversify your offering, this is an important area right here. This is an important area, this and this. And here, don't spend too much time. This is also input for you as testers, whether you're a usability tester or not. Well, you know that your customers will not look at this. This is not your first prio. These are prios. The nice image, the menu, price, and subscription. Now, I start this talk saying that data is very important. I hope that by what I said, you realize that there is a data bias, a gender bias based on data. But there is also a data gap. We are missing a lot of data. That data about number of toilets and car crashes and diagnosis of heart problems and medical studies is not going to solve itself. In fact, it is reinforcing itself. AI is reinforcing that bias. Because we use male examples and male data, the new models, and every company is now using AI, those new models are reinforcing that idea. So how can you stop that? If you want to be a company that services all audience, independent of gender or whatever, how can you do that? Well, there are a number of solutions there. The first one, that's an easy one, recruit more women. A, because they're good at what they're doing. B, because otherwise you miss those biases. Now, you know from the opening statement, where we had the same resume, where both male and female scored the male higher than the women. So you might say, Michael, but that's great. I want to recruit more women, but HR wouldn't let it pass by because of the gender biases. How can we overcome that? Well, there's a solution there. Typically, how does a recruiting process go? You send in your resume, somebody screens it, or a tool screens the resume for keywords. You're invited for an interview, 2 interviews, 3 interviews, one-on-one, and you're hired. Individual interviewing doesn't work. Individual interviewing causes that you hire 51% of underperformers. Because you're led by your confirmation bias and your gender bias and whatever kind of bias you might have. You see somebody you like in front of you, first glimpse, and you hire them. You see somebody that you don't like, that can be how they are dressed, how they smell, how they act, how they whatever, and you don't hire them. Not based on data, based on your biases. Now, what is there the solution? Don't go for one-on-one interviews. If we now need to recruit somebody, of course we screen the resumes that at least those that don't fit the solution are out. But we bring everybody together in one room, 4 people. And we ask the same question at the same time. And then you can compare 1 to n. And you can choose the best one. If you apply this technique, that is just 8% that underperforms that you will recruit, because you overcome that bias. So that's an easy solution. More women by putting them together in groups, having some sort of mini competition. You can do that with developers. You can do it with testing. Just take a whiteboard. Hey, I want you to write a piece of code on the whiteboard. 4 people, 4 whiteboards. Just write. Which might be for Gen Z and for Gen Alpha, which is coming now, very difficult, because you cannot use Stack Exchange and ChatGPT and whatever. Actually having to think about writing code might be a challenge. Or thinking about writing test cases. Oh my God, I cannot generate it? That's hard. Oops, sorry. So that's the first thing. Make sure your own staff is as diversified as possible. The second solution is use the value of the crowd. There are numerous platforms that can help you in diversifying your testing. Because typically your testing team already has an inclination. I guess the majority of you have already filed a defect or thought about a defect. You encountered something while testing that didn't look okay, and you said, it has been like this for so many, I'm not going to report a defect. That's also bias. So if you then use the value of crowd and you diversify in your crowd, I want whatever kind of gender, I want whatever kind of language, I want whatever kind of, I don't care. To overcome those biases, there are numerous platforms that allow you to profile on the type of testers you want. Because you see from H&M that people look differently at websites. And you see from those things that people use software in different ways. So why not test in that sense? This is a very cheap solution. Even though I like you to hire more women and different genders, it's not always a solution because budgets are limited. This is an easy way to scale up your solution. A third one, you might know the ISO standard 25010 about quality of software. It's a great standard, but it's not a complete standard. It tells you something about usability. Well, usability now has gotten a new name, which is even more difficult, that nobody understands. It tells you something about accessibility, and you have the web content accessibility guidelines and so on, but that doesn't tell you anything about gender or religion or whatever. So make up your own standard. What is my audience? And that starts with a test strategy, a test mission, a test vision. Where do we want to go? What is the typical audience? And how can we serve those? So put your own standards in the company, not only from a testing point of view, even though testing is a great starting point, but make sure that your analysts and your product owners and your proxies are aware of that. Hey guys, have we thought about this type of audience? No, okay, maybe we should, because when we do that, it might give new things. Great example, I'm coming from Belgium. We have a great factory in the southern part of Belgium called Effen Herstal. It's the 3rd largest weapons factory in the world. You know what they realized 4 years ago? If they create guns in pink, they sell them like hell. They sold millions of pink guns. In America, most women now have a pink gun. Great, nobody thought about it, and somebody said, you know what, if we diversify on that, because most guns are black or gray or in camouflage colors, no, we go for pink guns. New audience, new business, great. Now, when you come to testing, how can you test the things? Well, there are techniques for that. You can use heat maps, you can use eye tracking. You might say, Michael, whoa, that's so far away from us. If I start talking about usability, my boss goes mad, it's way too expensive. We don't have those resources. There are resources. I mean, go to Amazon and look for the iTribe. That costs you less than $200. And it works great. You install it, takes you 5-6 minutes, and it monitors where your irises are going on the screen. No, not anymore. iTribe is off the market. You find it second-hand. You don't find it new anymore. It has been acquired by Facebook. And Facebook thinks it's too dangerous because they want to use it for their own research. So the tool doesn't exist anymore, but you find it second-hand. But there are numerous solutions. You can go with some easy setup where you monitor where you are looking, or you can go for some lensy-like thing you put in front of your goggles. There are numerous solutions there. If you're testing mobile apps, your Samsung or your Galaxy has that type of stuff built in. You might not realize that, but if you're using Android and typically a Samsung device, it monitors your eyes constantly when you're looking on the screen. Your camera is constantly on. Put your phone in logging mode and check the logs. How do you think something, what is shown here, like smart scrolling is done? Of course, it has some gadgets in it that measures how the phone is tilted, but it also measures or views where your irises are looking at, and it scrolls automatically. So you can use that technology also to view how people look at your website. What are the parts of your website where they easily scroll through, the text, the images, and where are they looking at? And it gives you data where to focus, how to make a better website, but also where to focus your testing. You can get some nice things like this, a heat map. This is similar to what I showed you from H&M. So you can see the more red something becomes. Like here, this is red, this is red. There, this is something that people take a look at. Everything which is not colored or green, not that much. But you can also see something like a gaze plot. A gaze plot is the orders in which people look at your website. This is how their eyes move on the website. So then you see that they start right here, somewhere in the middle. Not the services you want to sell, that's only at 4, 5, and 6. So maybe that main image and that vision text is very important. Because if people don't see that vision text, they don't pay too much attention, they don't look at it for long, but it's the first thing they see. So that needs to be spot on. This helps you, again, to focus your testing toward what actually attracts your customers. And that's also a mind shift as a tester. It was a mind shift for me, because as a tester, I was always quality-oriented. Every defect is equally important, and the website needs to be as defect-free as possible, or the solution or the software. Well, this has shown me that certain defects are less important than others. Why would I care about something which is right here if no customer ever is going to look at it? This is not the highest priority. Last solution that I can present to you is to use persona-based testing. I guess the majority of you understand personas. Personas is a way to mimic virtual users of your system. So you're going to identify in brainstorm sessions what your typical user of your system is. And you give that person, that persona, a real name and a view and an overview. He or she is, that is what she wants, blah, blah, blah. But based on these personas, if you do that correctly, if you do a proper persona mapping, you will find new requirements and you will find new ways of testing. You can diversify in gender, you can diversify in language. How many of you do left-to-right reading? I guess everybody. You should try and test your solution in right-to-left reading. For people from Arabic countries or for those countries, suddenly you will see that a lot of your forms will not work anymore. That's great if you only work out Polish solutions, but if you have an international website, you might have people that want to fill out their form and are obstructed because you didn't take that persona into consideration. So it's never too bad to have personas too much. Maybe you can say, you know what, this is not a primary concern. That's great. Maybe somebody from that type, somebody who is over 80 years old, not our primary customer, but we need to take that into account, and it can be a spark for recognizing new tests. It can also be a great idea to start thinking about design thinking and using the personas for that. Based on your personas, you start to define different scenarios, you start to ideate, you start to divert and converge those ideas. I really love the concept of design thinking, because if you do it properly, it will also empower your testers to become a voice of creating better software. Instead of testing, which is seen as a reactive approach, it will help being seen as a proactive approach. Instead of finding mistakes and criticizing the product, we're actually enabling people to build a better product. That makes your business case to have a tester on the team much more valuable. Now, in this talk, there was a lot of stuff about gender. And I think when I talk about gender, it's about the difference between men and women. Yeah? So you might think that the goal of this talk is to make women the new superheroes of testing. Right? No, not right. Partially right. Of course, I would like to empower women and whatever gender possible, but that's not the main message. The main message is not to pinpoint on one specific profile. I want a complete squad of superheroes. I want to empower women and LGBTQ and religion and language and whatever. This is what we need to serve. This is our audience. A whole squadron of superpowers. Because the moment you forget this lovely creature here, you miss business. And that specific profile, for that specific gender or language or religion or whatever, might be the next millionaire that wants to invest in your solution. Might be the next customer that is blocked by something you have forgotten, either in creating requirements or testing the system. So it's not only about empowering women, it is about thinking about diversity, overcoming not only the gender bias, but every kind of bias there might be. So the next time, if you return to office Monday or Tuesday, if Monday is a holiday, then think about how can I make my requirements, my user stories, my visions, my epics more neutral, that is serve a broader audience, that we think about all these other cases and not only focus from one bias that we have. So, conclusions. I have two for you. First one I would like to stress out. If you talk about biases, you have the known knowns. Your known knowns are the system you are building and that you're testing. Your requirements, your user stories, your visions, your epics, your use cases, your UML models, BPMN drawings, those are the known knowns. These are easy to test. You can manually test these, you can use automation for that. No brainer. This talk is about testing the known unknowns. We know that we have a different audience now, after this talk, that we don't serve properly, that might have issues. We'll start testing that. Use those personas, use those tiny little usability studies. Try to diversify, think like somebody, something else, and try to envision how the system works for you. And you will get better software. Now the next step is testing the unknown unknowns. Because there might be even profiles that you can't even imagine that would like to use your product. But then your next step, focus first on making sure the biases are gone. And the second is be aware that there are biases. You are here, thank you for being here, but a lot of people are unaware that they have biases. When I talk to recruiters, I gave this talk also at a recruiting conference, and I said, you are biased in gender. The majority of the audience was female, they wouldn't believe it. And they did the studies, they came back to me, you know what, you are right, we are biased. Because if you take out the gender and the name from the resume, we would have made different decisions. We all have biases. I have biases, you have biases. The thing is, how can we overcome them? How can we ensure that they don't affect how we handle people, but also how we bring solutions to the market and how we test them? Because that's the main message. Next week, you go back to your office and you start testing things. You start testing things based on the things you have in you, your biases, whether you're male, female, or whatever gender, whatever religion, whatever language. This is your knowledge box that you're using to build your mental image of your testing. Try to think outside of the box and make the people around you aware of it. It's okay to create a defect saying, you know what? As a woman, I do not like how this website is created because it doesn't follow my logical train of thought. Or as a man, I don't like how it's created, or as whatever. That's fine. It's not about pinpointing, it's about bringing attention to those biases. So I was put to the attention that my time is running out. So I would like to thank you for listening, for bearing with me. I know it's not a typical IT subject, but I think it's of very important matter to you. If you want to share thoughts, if you want to connect, the QR code to my profile is there. If you have any questions, slides will be shared, and I hope we have still some time for questions. Yep. Okay, great.
Thank you very much, Michael. First of all, let me comment that talking about not typical IT subject is bias as well. So, and I give you voice to you. So, do you have any? Yeah, okay. So.
I think I mostly wanted to say thank you for speaking up as an ally, because I think if there was a woman up there, the subconscious or conscious bias would say she's being hysterical. She doesn't know what she's talking about. So thank you for that. Yeah, it does help being on the other side. So when you try to open the little compartment, the glove compartment in the car, and you keep getting your nails, messed up or broken because it hasn't been tested by a person with longer fingernails. So even such small things. I remember about 5 years ago, there was a new model of this iWatch that my colleagues from work were super excited, and they were like, oh, and it tracks everything, it does this and this. And I looked at it and I said, well, where's the menstrual cycle on it? And they went, what? And I said, well, 52% of the world population are women who menstruate. Why doesn't it track that? And they said, because it's not important. Thank you very much. I don't have questions, just thank you.
Thank you so much. And if I can reply to that, when I was composing this talk, I had a lot of discussions with women because I didn't feel comfortable as a man presenting this. This should be empowered by women. So if you want to share this message, just reach out, take the slides, go on stage, alter them as much as you want and spread the message. Because I should not be there, you should be here.
Okay. Any more comments or questions? Okay. Actually, I have a question, because from the statistical point of view, I have a second notion about choosing what to do. It's a Pareto principle. So do you think that data bias and what you were talking about goes counter to Pareto principle or goes together with Pareto principle?
It's hard. I think, especially with nowadays business, regardless of Pareto principle, the data that we're using is reinforcing other data. So Pareto is about the 80-20 principle, right? Mm-hmm. Well, this is, for example, everything regarding gender is not the 80-20 question. It's a 52-48 principle. And because we're designing products from one point of view, using data from that point of view, we don't take into account the other part of the people. Okay. So because your target audience is different, you have no idea how to make the change. So if next week or whatever, somebody asks, how can we make the product more successful? Turn it around. What is our audience and what are potential different audiences? Think about the pink gun. You might not have thought about it, but maybe you can create a watch just purely based for the menstrual cycle. Why not? There will be an audience.
Okay. Thank you very much. Any more questions? No? Okay. So thank you, Michael, again.
You're welcome.
Great talk, great presentation.